Yes, it is the 1st of July, but that doesn't mean that there isn't earth-shattering news in the college football landscape. The result of this earth-shattering news? Iowa State is making the Big 12 championship game. No doubt in my mind, and we're talking about today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day, making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcasting platform, be sure to hit subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. I am Nick Marvitz here with you to break down everything going on in Cyclone Nation and everything around it, because today we are starting off today's episode with the Jake Retzlaff story. BYU, how does that tie into Iowa State making the Big 12 championship game? You'll have to wait and see. I'll cover that first. Then we're going to talk about Matt Campbell going on a podcast, having a few quotes, a few things to say, and where honestly what I think of those. To be quite frank, that's really what it comes down to. Then we're going to talk a little bit of Carson Hansen in the third segment. Stick around to find out what about Carson Hansen in that third little bit. Can't wait to get to all of that and more. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Okay, it appears to me that the Jake Retzlaff kind of saga may be coming to a close. Something we haven't covered a whole lot here at Locked On Cyclones, purely because this is not directly related to Iowa State, though it is indirectly related to Iowa State. So I was kind of waiting to see where things ironed out, where things kind of ended up, if you will, because no one really knows how long it's going to take, what's going to happen here, what's going to happen there. Let's just let things unfold and we'll react as necessary. Well, it appears as though we can now react. It sounds like Jake Retzlaff will be going into the transfer portal. Okay, obviously had some allegations against him. Sounds like those were dropped, but he did admit to some acts that basically violated the code of BYU, and so he was going to face a suspension. And though I don't believe he has at this time, at least of recording, officially entered the transfer portal, he does plan to, is what I've been seeing. And so basically the root of the whole thing here is that it sounds like BYU will be without Jake Retzlaff next season. Okay, that's really what we need to worry about. Okay, let's really dial it in to what matters here and not get too caught in the weeds about this, that, and the other thing. What it comes down to is BYU will likely have a different quarterback this season than they did last, and Iowa State plays BYU. Okay, so how does that affect Iowa State? How does that affect the Big 12? Great question. I'm very proud of you for asking that very question. Let's take a look. Obviously, Iowa State will be going into the game against BYU at a solid 7-0 after defeating Kansas State, South Dakota, Iowa, Arkansas State, and then the bye week. Of course, we always get wins there. Arizona, Cincinnati, Colorado, and then they'll go into their next bye week, get that win as well. And then BYU at home. Okay, that's a big one. That was one that I circled on this year's schedule. Now, does this news mean that Iowa State automatically gets the win? No, but in my opinion, does it mean that it's more likely? Absolutely. I think that that's a fair assessment to make. Now, was Jake Retzlaff the next Tom Brady? I don't know if people were looking at him that way, but I do know that BYU was very, very good last season. I think a lot of people forget about how good BYU was last year. Let's not forget, right? Arizona State was very, very good. We saw them in Jerry World for the Big 12 championship, and it was abundantly clear just how good they were. Then they went on to face Texas and very well could have won that game. Maybe should have, depending on which boat you're in. And so I think a lot of people, when they think of the Big 12 last season, think of Arizona State and how good they were, Iowa State, how poorly they performed in the Big 12 championship game, and kind of how Colorado's season ended. I think those are the big three takeaways for a lot of people. There are going to be people that are fans of every team in the Big 12 that are going to have different takeaways. Okay, there are going to be people that have ties to people that are, Big 12 fans or whatever the case might be. There's going to be tons of different takeaways, but I think a large majority of the takeaways were those three because they were on kind of the biggest stages in Colorado with all of the attention that they had. Obviously, something that was kind of considered to be the Big 12's third place, if you will. was kind of what that Alamo Bowl was kind of perceived as. That was a big game. And Colorado, after the season they had, not quite living up to that, why it was a big point of kind of contention, if you will. So all of that to say, BYU and the season they had kind of went under the radar. Remember, they went 9-0 before losing to Arizona State and Kansas. They were looking really good, and they had honestly a very good case to make the 12-team playoff. There were a lot of conversations about, was this purely disrespect that BYU did not get into the playoff because of how good they were last season. Now, they did slip up a few times, but it kind of felt like Kansas was that team last year. So every so often, the Big 12 has a team that just comes through in the middle of the season, not a very good team, and just wrecks the landscape. And sometimes your team's going to fall victim to that team, right? That's going to happen. So I didn't put a ton of weight into that Kansas loss just based on what Kansas did last season for BYU. Obviously, Arizona State being a very good team. BYU just kind of lost by the tiebreakers, which is really unfortunate. So what I'm saying is we can't forget how good BYU was last season. We just can't. And the same way that I'm talking about how Iowa State is going to be really good this season. They were really good last season. They've kind of got the momentum. They lost a few big pieces, but they're returning a lot. Like kind of the same case with BYU. A lot of weapons on this BYU roster. Saw a lot of success last season. We can't write them off. But, but different quarterback. Very important to note. Now, we haven't talked at length about BYU's schedule here, and I don't expect us to really ever. But kind of looking at their schedule, just browsing through it, you got Portland State, Stanford, East Carolina as your non-conference, and Colorado, West Virginia, Arizona, Utah, obviously Iowa State, Texas Tech, TCU, Cincinnati, UCF. The reason I bring up their schedule first is because I do think that there's a chance BYU is one of those final teams at the end of the year, be it a tiebreaker scenario or whatever, that Iowa State's probably going to have to contend with. The way that I'm looking at it here, it's not like they have a super easy or hard schedule. Colorado obviously is going to be looking for some vengeance early. We're not exactly sure what West Virginia is going to look like with the kind of revamp of their roster. Iowa State, I do think that that's a win. I'll get into that in a second for Iowa State, not for BYU. Texas Tech going to be good. I think TCU is going to be good. I think a lot of their 50-50 games, they might end up falling short, and they'll probably lose one more than expected. Maybe early, maybe Stanford is a team, just based on, getting the kind of the kinks out of the system, figuring it out. And then as they get into a groove, just not quite having that same level of continuity. Of course, that's college sports, and that's always going to happen, but just who knows? It's kind of the assumption that I'm making here. I do think Iowa State gets that win. Being in Jack Trice is going to be a big help, and that's going to help, obviously, with the kind of head-to-head going into that end of season kind of tiebreaker situation, whatever it looks like, which we aren't exactly sure at this point in time because it's July. Nonetheless, really quickly, a couple of the quarterbacks to look out for BYU. Bear Bachmeier, a freshman at 6'2", 225. McKay Hillstead at 5'10", 195. And then Trayson, I'm going to say Bourget, very fancy name there, 6'2", 205. Couple guys that can really elevate this BYU program, or at least get the job done. We'll have to see who does what, where, how they're utilized. Maybe, who knows, maybe BYU goes with a multiple quarterback rotation. I don't know for sure exactly what they're going to do because I am not a coach on the BYU staff. But all I'm saying is, with this level of uncertainty, at least at this point in the season, I think it's fair to assume right now, this could change. This probably will change, but I think it's fair to assume that Iowa State's in a much better spot now. We don't know where Jake Retzlaff will go for sure. I don't know where he could go. It's kind of late. And I'm not even sure really what that looks like, to be honest, actually. Anyways, nonetheless, I do think Iowa State gets closer to a Big 12 title, or at least a Big 12 championship game appearance with this departure so far, as at least is what it seems, from Jake Retzlaff. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, or at Nick_Marv on Twitter. I check that stuff out every single day. But don't go anywhere, because in this second segment, we're talking about Matt Campbell and a big pair of quotes that he had in a recent podcast appearance, and how I think that they are very important to today's football team, this one that'll be wheeled out in just a few months. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned on the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. Whether I'm placing a same game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Iowa State coach Matt Campbell, okay, a guy that is known for his absolute demolishing of the mic time and time. Here at Locked On Cyclones, myself, Nick Marvitz, I am a huge fan of every time Matt Campbell gets on any mic ever of all time. The man, it kind of him and Otzelberger, they just constantly have great things to say. And the way they speak, in my opinion, is very embodiment of the Cyclone way. And they also get me fired up literally every single time. Now, Matt Campbell was on the Never Stop Getting Better podcast and, was kind of talking about the last few years. Now, granted, we'll probably talk more about this tomorrow, but there was one thing in particular that he was talking about, and it's about kind of the history over the last few years of Iowa State and the public perception of Iowa State. And so he was talking about how, we're still little old Iowa State, whatever, going to the Big 12 championship game. I think that, that affected how a lot of people perceive Iowa State. And I am doing a lot of paraphrasing here. But basically he said that, now every team is going to say, well, you can't let Iowa State beat you. And every time Iowa State was either at home or on the road, they got their best. They got everyone's best. Then Iowa State kind of didn't exactly live up to expectations for the next few years. I don't think that anyone can really argue with me on that end. 4-win season in there, not exactly ideal. Nonetheless, now more than ever, I think that this is true. That's really what I'm getting at. Now, in this clip that I saw, which I'm going to listen to the entire thing, this clip that I saw, he doesn't talk about that specifically, but I think that you're seeing it, or you will see it now more than ever. I think it's fair to assume that Iowa State has reached a level of importance, I suppose is maybe the word I would use. It's going to catch the attention of other teams. Now, obviously, Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game last year, big first 11 win season after obviously the defeat, or I guess the victory over Miami. How would you say that? The defeat of Miami? Is that how you would say that? I know what I was trying to say. Got a little bit more medieval kind of in my brain than I was anticipating. Nonetheless, sorry. A little bit of a sidetrack there. Point is, Iowa State is booming with success right now, especially in comparison to recent years. And so now I think we're getting to a point where Iowa State is considered as one of the best teams. Does that exactly line up with what Matt Campbell said as far as little old Iowa State? You can't let this, little school beat you. I don't think so. The way that I'm perceiving it is that Iowa State is now one of the higher level programs in the Big 12. Not so much, they had a fluky year. They might be good, but they're still little old Iowa State. You can't let them beat you. I don't think that's the case. I think it is truly now, okay, Iowa State's on our schedule. We have to get ready to roll. And that's a great spot to be in. I think that's exactly where you want to be. That's what it takes to move up in the ranks and to see sustained success. Obviously, is that perception of those around you that, holy cow, this team is legit. And I think that now more than ever, not only in football, but also in basketball, maybe less so as far as a margin from last year to this year. But across the board, I think Iowa State athletics are now in a different position than they were, in 2019, 2017, 2012, 2005. Basketball, obviously, in those early 2000s, very good. My point really more targeted at football. I don't think that anyone has taken Iowa State super, super seriously, really up until this point. Honestly, even when Iowa State went to the Big 12 championship game for the first time, I didn't exactly get the sense, and granted, I was much younger, but I didn't exactly get the sense that people were scared of Iowa State. It still felt like it was one of those like, oh, it's just Iowa State. And now maybe I'm wrong, and if I am wrong, let me know in the comments. Let me know at Twitter at Nick_Marv. Just let me hear it, okay? Because I'm from small town Iowa, a lot of Hawkeye fans. It just wasn't exactly a huge topic of conversation. And honestly, at that point, I didn't even really know what Twitter was yet. So still very disconnected. Very much could be wrong in that take, but at least from the people I was around, it wasn't necessarily that way. And in the heart of Iowa, not that far from Ames, it's like, feels like maybe that would be a conversation, at least talking about how good Iowa State is. Wasn't quite as common as I would have thought. Now, I think at least in my day to day and definitely more online, I am seeing a lot more of Iowa State being legit. And kind of the gauge on that too is other schools talking more down on Iowa State, right? It's like when the cool kid comes in with the sweet haircut and everyone's talking about how lame the haircut is because they just know that they can't pull it off. It's like, okay, now Iowa State's legit. Iowa State is a real Big 12 contender. We're going to get mad at the shape of their press box. How does that? Okay. All right. We're still going to beat you. So thank you for that. Let's move on. That kind of thing where I don't think that was really the case. I think a lot of people just kind of didn't really worry about too much about Iowa State. They kind of just like, you know what? Let them do their thing. They're over there playing their games. We're going to see them once a year. We're going to beat them. Not a big deal. Whatever. Uh, Speaking solely on football, I think that was kind of the perception of it. And so I am excited to now be in an era where Iowa State is more feared, right? More, I would say, respected. Definitely more circle on the calendar type of a team. Last year I don't think was a fluke, and I think a lot of people can sense that. I think a lot of people can kind of see the ramping up of Iowa State athletics. You're going to see that with the transfer portal and with the recruiting. Iowa State is killing it now. Didn't bring home Tamala, I understand that, but definitely doing better this season than they have in the last 5 years. Maybe not combined, but certainly across the board, year to year, Iowa State recruiting better because Iowa State is better. That's just how it works. You get better, you recruit better, and that's going to lead to better or more success down the road, which is what exactly I think is being sensed throughout the Big 12. Maybe not so much on a national scale yet. We still got a little bit of a ways to go on that front, but I do think that in the Big 12, it is largely it's more recognized now that Iowa State is going to be a problem. Always been a problem in basketball. Always kind of been dangerous, if you will. Football, not so much. But I do think that the times are changing. I really do. The question is, where does Iowa State attack on offense next season? Some have some thoughts. I have other thoughts. We'll talk about that coming up here right after this. Here at Locked On Cyclones, Locked On, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I, Nick Marvitz, really think that Iowa State is going to be a 10-win team next season in football. I really do. Let me know what you think down below or at Nick_Marv on Twitter. I just can't shake it. The way that I feel about this team, I don't know that I felt this way. And granted, I am getting into the nitty-gritty, like specifically this way about an Iowa State team in quite some time. I'm very excited. I think the momentum is there. I think the pieces are there. And I think Iowa State will see a lot of success. Now, Alec Bussey of 24/7 Sports, we interviewed him a while ago now, talking mostly basketball, but we also did talk some football as well. Wasn't as high on the Cyclones. Okay, I personally, laid it out. I said, I think this team's going to be really good. I think this is where we're going to excel. I think these are areas where we weren't so great last year, and I think this is how we're going to get better, or at least how I'm seeing it. And he kind of was like, I'm not so high on this team. I think that they'll be okay. I don't think they'll be great. I was shocked. I was genuinely shocked, shooketh, if you will. And the reason I bring Alec Bussey up is because he wrote an article the other day about Carson Hansen potentially being the leading scorer back-to-back years for Iowa State. The first to do it since Breece Hall in, I believe it was 2020, 2021. Yes, that looks to be correct. Hansen was a dog last year for Iowa State. I think we can all agree on that. Definitely amped up that running game that I don't think a lot of people were expecting to come from him. I think a lot of people thought that it would come from Abusama, and myself included, especially after that Kansas State game. I think I know that I personally was very much influenced by that game, but I do think a lot of other people were as well. Nonetheless, Carson Hansen comes out kind of that power between the tackles back. He's fast. He stretched the field at times, but more so really when you needed a few yards, if you were going to hand it off between the tackles, give it to Hansen or give the sneak to Beck. Is really kind of what it was. And Hansen stood up tall, or I guess, realistically, more got low below his, kind of in the, what do they say? Low between the pads? Below the pads? I think it's below the pads. Nonetheless, really, really gave that power and was there for Iowa State when we needed him the most. Scored a lot, ran a lot. Not going to get too far into the stats here because I'm actually refuting Bussey's point. I don't think that Hansen will be the leading scorer. Now, of course, I'm not talking about Rocco Beck through the air, different conversation. I do think Abu Sama's in that conversation, still a running back. But I wonder if Iowa State will wouldn't it be crazy if we threw more touchdowns to a single player than we had running? Now, I understand that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you got to stay with me here. Essentially, what needs to happen for this case to unfold is Iowa State needs to very evenly split up scores amongst running backs, okay? Probably going to need to score from a distance on the field quite a few times this season for this to work because generally inside the 10, you're not like kind of going roundabout with the running backs. You kind of know, all right, we're going with Hansen here or we're going with Abu Sama here, whatever it is that year or whatever they've seen. They're like, all right, we're going to go with XYZ player. And if it doesn't go, then we'll go to this play and we might come back to him. We're not necessarily going to say, all right, we're going to run it with Hansen, then we're going to run it with Sama, then we're going to run it with Peppers. So we're probably going to need to score from a ways out a couple times, realistically. Probably just what's going to have to happen for this case to unfold. Let's say that happens. Let's say that the yards and the touchdowns are pretty evenly distributed between the running backs. Maybe it's Abu Sama, Carson Hansen, and River Peppers was the top three that we've kind of talked about. Easton Miller, a redshirt sophomore in there as well. AJ Peterson, redshirt sophomore, then a couple more young guys that could, who knows? Maybe I would never wish we have a down year from a running back, but maybe if we do, we go to kind of more of a split, just constant rotation backfield, hypothetically speaking. Basically what that does is it opens the floor, or I guess opens the door to the floor for a dominant wide receiver or at least receiving option to take over as the top scorer for Iowa State. I understand this is a little bit out there, and I get where Alec Bussey was coming from saying that Carson Hansen will repeat. I get it. It's very plausible, okay? However, it could be Abu Sama, it could be River Peppers. Who knows exactly what it would be? I think a running back does make the most sense, but let's play out a scenario. Who would it be if it were through the air? So we have to go under the assumption that the running backs pretty much evenly split up touchdowns. Maybe there's some, garbage time touchdowns that come from guys we don't see as much on the field. Those kinds of situations. That's how we get the running back total for a single player down while still scoring the points because we don't want to score literally every point through the air. If that happens, where does the ball go through the air? I don't think it will be a tight end, but if it were to be a tight end, obviously Bramer and Burkle are kind of the top two. Cooper Alexander is a wild card. I've spoken very highly of Cooper Alexander over the last few months. I'm not going to rule him out either. Okay. I don't think it'll be a tight end because they won't have the long, as much at least, of the long distance touchdown threat, right? So from the alumni section between the 40s or whatever, you're not going to see as many touchdowns going to tight ends. You're just not. And then that basically means that every time we're in the red zone, we have to resort to a tight end. Will that happen? I don't know. I don't think it's out of the cards. I do think that Iowa State could turn that way. With the amount of receiving options that Iowa State has, though, it will be difficult to narrow in and say, you know what, we're going to get it to Bramer every single time, just because if Bramer's that guy, then what does the defense do? All right, we'll double up Bramer. We'll triple up Bramer. We'll make you beat us with Xavier Townsend. Boom, little jet action across the middle. Cut. Oh, we'll put the brakes on him, accelerate into the end zone. Boom. What are we doing here? Like, that's what Iowa State offense is going to be. We're going to be very much a utility. What are those called? Swiss Army knife, right? We're going to be a Swiss Army knife of attack options. Okay. So I don't know that it can be a guy in the red zone that we're going to consistently be looking at as far as receiving options goes, which is why turning to the wide receivers does seem to make the most sense if you're not going to go running back. And for that reason, I'm going to take Xavier Townsend. Now, in that completely made up hypothetical scenario that I literally just came up with less than a second before saying it, in which I imitated a car as Xavier Townsend, okay? There's a reason that I did that, and it was subconscious. Xavier Townsend could legitimately be essentially a running back at the wide receiver position. I understand it took me a little bit to get here, but I do think I seriously think that Xavier Townsend can unlock this offense and push them to a level we haven't really seen. This utility type of player. They talked about it in spring ball. This guy, they can put him in the slot. They can bring him in motion. They can put him out wide, standing in the roster at 5'11", 185. Not the tallest guy ever, but was Julian Edelman the tallest guy ever? No. Okay, so you don't have to be tall to be, this lion's share type of guy or a very integral part of the offense. I think that Xavier Townsend will score a lot through the air as far as like receiving passes, but also in sweeps, okay, in motions into the backfield in little bubble passes, stretching the field that way. And his vertical up and down speed is going to be, it's just going to be the key, right? So if you bring him in, now obviously I'm just making this play up, but imagine you've got two wide out to the left, and maybe Chase Soul on the right? So it's all the way out to the left. Maybe you got Eli Green, Xavier Townsend in the slot, River Peppers to the right of Rocco, and then you've got, let's say, just knocked over my light. Awesome. Chase Soul out to the right. You bring Xavier Townsend in from the left slot. Boom, kind of comes around Rocco, and then as he passes Rocco, backpedals, play starts. Now he's bubbling out to the left with River Peppers lead blocking, and you've got Eli Green, as I said, kind of out there on the perimeter. Are you telling me that Xavier Townsend can't blow that play up, stretch the field that way, beat the one corner? He's got the speed to beat the safety or cut inside. I mean, those are the kind of plays that I think we need to mentally be ready for this Iowa State offense. I'm not saying it won't be Carson Hansen. I'm not saying it won't be Abu Sama. I'm not saying it won't be River Peppers. I'm saying look at Xavier Townsend. Legit could actually be a serious offensive weapon threat for Iowa State this season. That's all I'm saying. Keep it in the back of your heads. Also, keep in the back of your heads hitting that subscribe button down below. Completely free. Helps us prove that it is, in fact, a Cyclone State. And you can find me at Nick_Marv on Twitter if you want more content there. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.